Thanks for sharing the experiences from Kosovo. You have facilitated this discussion to develop this joint approach of the donors to support the TVET reform there in cooperation with the DCDVET. And based on these initial discussions that we had and clarifications of terminologies and approaches, then you have developed so-called strategic framework. Could you describe what it is, this strategic framework, what its purpose, and if it's transferable to other projects?
Yeah, first of all, thanks a lot for providing this talk here. Before talking about the text and the context of the strategic framework, a few words about the context are necessary in my view. Kosovo is typical of a country with three characteristics. Firstly, a strong pressure for improvements in the VET system. Secondly, the will of the government to initiate a VET reform. And thirdly, the willingness of numerous donors to support the development of this reform. In Kosovo, as in many other countries, the ambition is to involve the business sector in the development and implementation of such VET programs. This should enable the transition from a purely school-based VET system to a dualized VET system. The challenge to be tackled is obvious. How can an urgent need, good intentions of the government, and the potential of donor partnerships be brought together? In the Kosovo example, a strategic initiative was launched with the aim of defining the priorities of the reform and closer harmonization of the donor partnerships. So, how did we proceed? Development partnerships in most countries face the challenge of combining two logics: the project logic of individual donors, which is mostly limited to a selected part of the VET system. And secondly, the strategic logic of the development of the system, in which the individual parts should fit together to form a whole. In this initiative in Kosovo, we combine the two logics by using a specific development approach, the so-called multiple nucleus approach. This approach is reflected in the guiding principles. The donors remain independent in their choice of project priorities, but aligned to a strategic framework. Starting from a strategic framework that captures the main components of a comprehensive VET system, the donor projects address relevant areas of this framework and contribute to the development of the whole. Alignment with the strategic framework prevents different projects from doing the same thing, or individual projects from including objectives that do not have high relevance or priority. How did we arrive at a strategic framework? Based on a study I published in 2023, Roadmap to High Quality Dual VET, and taking into account the most important requirements of the Kosovo VET system, such a strategic framework was agreed in a workshop with all donor organizations active in Kosovo: Germans, Swiss, Austrians, Luxembourg, USA, European Union. The framework includes 9 components that must be addressed when implementing a comprehensive VET reform. At the micro level, at the very bottom of this chart, at the micro level, the development and introduction of dual VET programs requires comprehensive curriculum development with the involvement of the business sector. In addition, dual VET programs must be aligned with the education system. On the second level, special attention is needed to involve the business sector and prepare VET schools for their changing roles. At the third level, capacity building measures should contribute to the professionalization of VET staff in companies and VET schools. And not to forget the fourth level, the upper level, the macro level, where some changes need to be made to adapt the institutional and legal framework and secure funding for the reformed system. Not all components require the same attention and intervention at the same time. but they all need to be considered. How did we proceed? It was agreed to hold an expert workshop for each component. One of the main objectives of these workshops was to identify potential change requirements that could then be addressed as part of ongoing or future projects of the development partners. The workshops took place in spring 2024. All workshops addressed the following key question for each component. What are the key challenges and requirements for change that need to be overcome in order to promote dual learning? Based on desk research, relevant information on the status quo of each component was compiled and key questions were formulated. These were sent to the experts in advance of the workshop and feedback was provided by them. The workshop focused on clarifying and deepening the questions as well as additional suggestions and assessments from the experts. The results of the workshop were then documented and sent back to the participating experts for validation. In the final phase, the comments on the draft were reflected upon and incorporated into the final strategy paper. This paper is handed over to the donor community and the government to be considered when designing the next steps of the VET reform. That's more or less the process and the result of this strategic initiative.
Thank you very much. And if you are talking about experts, you mean leaders and collaborators of the development projects, correct?
That's right, yeah.
And from this experience, what can other projects learn?
I would say there are 3 lessons learned, basically. As we all know, the proof of the pudding is in the eating. In this sense, it is still too early to assess the final impact of this strategic initiative. But what can be said at this stage can be summarized in these 3 points. The first one is the strategic initiative opened up a comprehensive perspective on the reform of the VET system. In this way, it was possible to combine a bird's eye view with concrete projects at grassroots level. So they brought together the overall strategic perspective with the project logic on the grassroots level. And secondly, it gave donors an opportunity to reflect on how their own project can contribute to sustainable reform. In this way, donor projects can be designed to generate maximum impact. Last but not least, the strategic framework provides a good baseline for monitoring and steering the VET reform. So if the government really wants to embark into a substantial VET reform, they get the template, they get the concept for doing so.
Thank you. And now you have elaborated or developed a case study on this experience. Can you give us some insights? What can we find in this study?
Yeah, what can we find in the study? The case study, of course, goes into much more detail than I have been able to do in this short presentation here. It looks at the relevant political, the social, the economic, the demographic, and the migration background and recognizes the successes of previous and ongoing donor projects. It also explains the strategic approach taken, and it gives some insights into the process and reports on the results achieved. Overall, I would say the case study is an example of good practice that cannot be copied, but can potentially be adapted for development partnerships in other countries as well.
Thank you so much. So this is also the reason why other projects should read it and learn from it. The study is available on the DCD website. And with this, I want to thank you. And the journey is not finished yet. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.